I never imagined I would speak these words. Not at 14. Not with lungs that once stopped breathing. Not with a heart that once beat its last. But something happened to me. Something holy, terrifying, and too real to ignore. I died. And in that death, I saw him. I stood beyond the veil, where no heartbeat dares to reach, and I beheld a truth that seared through every shadow of my former life. A truth that didn't just ask to be shared. It demanded it. It commanded it. And I was not permitted to return without it. This is not a story I wanted to tell. Even now, my hands tremble. My voice shakes. Because to speak it is to relive it. To speak it is to reopen the wound where eternity touched a child and left her changed forever. He told me to tell you something, not about the stars or the end times or secrets buried in the earth. No, he told me to speak of fasting. Fasting, that ancient path the world has mocked, ignored, dismissed. He showed me its power, and what I saw, what I heard from his own mouth, will shatter you. Because we have forgotten. We have abandoned the sacred. We have traded discipline for indulgence, surrender for comfort. And in doing so, we have weakened our hands for the battle that has already begun. Jesus showed me why fasting breaks chains that no sermon can, why it silences demons that no volume of worship can shake. He showed me why the enemy fears the one who fasts in secret more than the one who shouts in the spotlight. He said to me, "Tell them." And when I hesitated, he said again, "Tell them." And then came the words that have haunted every silence since. Keep speaking. So I speak. I speak because I saw what waits beyond the veil. I speak because I was told that many would fall in the days to come, not from sin, but from spiritual starvation. And I speak because there is a remnant listening. Someone, you, was meant to hear this. This message is not entertainment. It's not a thrill. It is a warning, a call, a holy whisper wrapped in the voice of a girl who died and came back carrying fire. So if you can hear me, don't just listen. Remember the fast. Remember the flame. Remember the vow I made in death that I now fulfill in breath. Keep speaking. Keep speaking. Keep speaking. I was 14 and I thought I understood the world. My days were ordinary. School in the mornings, homework in the evenings, scrolling through my phone until sleep took me. Nothing about me stood out. I was quiet, curious. I kept to myself, even when surrounded by noise. My room was filled with soft lights and stuffed animals, remnants of childhood I hadn't yet surrendered. The walls held posters I no longer believed in. And every night, I pulled a blanket over the ache in my chest and pretended everything was fine. But it wasn't. Not really. There was a hollow inside me, one I couldn't name. Not depression, not sadness. It was deeper than that. A spiritual hunger I didn't yet have words for. An ache for something eternal. I didn't know how to pray. Not really. I said the words before bed, half whispered, half forgotten. God, protect my family. God, keep me safe. But I didn't know him. Not like I do now. I knew about Jesus from Sunday school. I could draw his face with colored pencils. I could recite verses like memory tricks. But I didn't know the fire in his eyes. I didn't know that his voice could unmake you and rebuild you in the same breath. No one told me. No one told me that you could starve your flesh and feed your soul. No one told me that some things can only be birthed in silence and hunger. No one told me that heaven listens louder when the stomach is empty. Instead, I was fed everything but truth. Endless entertainment, noise, validation in digital hearts, distraction disguised as joy. I remember a day, just 2 weeks before I died. I sat on my bed, scrolling endlessly, and I suddenly burst into tears. I didn't know why. There was no trigger, no heartbreak, just this deep, soul-breaking sense that I was wasting something precious. Time, breath, life. I told no one. How do you explain a cry that comes from the spirit, not the eyes? I started dreaming strange dreams. A woman in white, a garden with no sun, a door of fire I couldn't open, and in each dream I would hear a voice, low, ancient, full of sorrow. Prepare your heart. I woke up each time with my chest aching, my hands shaking. I told myself it was just my imagination, but part of me knew. Something sacred was drawing near. There was one night I'll never forget. I lay awake long past midnight. Everyone else was asleep, but I couldn't close my eyes. The room felt too still, too holy, like I wasn't alone, like something, or someone, was standing just beyond the veil, watching, waiting. I remember whispering into the darkness, I don't know what's happening to me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was talking to myself. There was no audible reply, no flash of light, but something moved inside me, like a breath, like a flame flickering to life. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of the end, the final stretch before I left this world behind. I felt it in the wind, in the silence between my mother's footsteps, in the coldness of the water on my skin. Everything began to feel unreal, like I was standing on the edge of something too vast to name. Some nights, I would stare at the moon and feel a pull, as if eternity was trying to remember me, as if heaven itself was whispering, "You are not ready, but you are called." I wish I could say I responded. I didn't. I stayed busy, I kept scrolling, I kept pretending, because I was just a girl, and no one ever told me that the King of Glory calls children too. But he does. And he did. He called my name in the dark, and everything began to unravel. The illusion, the comfort, the numbness. All of it began to crack under the weight of the sacred. Looking back now, I know that what I felt, what I feared, was the nearness of God. I was being prepared for something I didn't ask for, a journey I never would have chosen, an encounter that would rip the veil from my eyes and leave me undone. And the hunger, the quiet ache in my bones, that was the Spirit calling me to fast. Before I even knew what fasting was. Because even in my distraction, he was planting seeds. Even in my rebellion, he was whispering, "Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire." And when the moment came, when my body collapsed and my soul lifted, I would understand what he meant. But for now, I was still asleep, and heaven was getting ready to wake me. It happened on a Thursday. The sky outside was pale and soft, like it hadn't fully woken up. I remember the way the morning light spilled across the tiles in the hallway, how my feet felt heavier than usual, how my heart felt quieter. I should have known. Something sacred always comes wrapped in stillness. That day felt stretched, hollow. Time moved like syrup, thick and slow. And inside me, something ancient stirred, a knowing I didn't have language for. I was walking from class when I first felt the pressure, not pain, not yet, just a tightening in my chest, like the air around me had thickened, like invisible hands were pressing gently, asking, "Are you ready?" By afternoon, I was struggling to breathe. The world blurred at the edges. Sounds came slower, colors dimmed. No one noticed. I sat in the back of the classroom, watching the whiteboard dissolve into light. I blinked, and suddenly the room tilted. A ringing filled my ears. Not loud, just insistent, holy. My heart began to pound, too fast, too hard. Then, silence. A coldness spread through my body. It began in my fingertips, then climbed slowly, like a tide swallowing the shore. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The world began to dim. Not like the sun setting, but like a curtain being drawn. Then, darkness. Not the kind of darkness that frightens. Not the kind filled with monsters or dread. It was velvet, thick, warm, still. And then, I was no longer in my body. I hovered above it, watching my arms go limp, my head tilt to the side. There was no panic, no fear, just awareness. I was free. The weight of flesh had fallen away, and I was light, like breath, like mist, like spirit. I could see people rushing, voices shouting, hands pressing on my chest, a siren somewhere in the distance, but it all felt far away, like watching a play from behind a glass wall. And then I began to rise, at first slowly, then with a gentle pull, like gravity had reversed. The ceiling passed through me, the clouds parted like veils, and I was being carried. By wind, by light, by something holy I could not see but could feel. Every molecule in me was singing. Every part of me was awakening to something greater. And in the rising, I heard it. The first whisper, ancient, gentle, sharp as a sword wrapped in silk. You were brought here to remember. I froze, if a soul can freeze. I knew that voice, not from sermons, not from dreams, but from before birth, before language, before skin. It was the voice that had once spoken stars into being, the voice that knew the secret name of my soul. You were brought here to remember. The words rang inside me like a bell struck in a cathedral. I was being summoned, not to be judged, but to be reminded, to be returned to something I had once known, something I had once been. Around me, the darkness began to glow, not with fire, but with presence. The kind of light that doesn't shine from a source, but is the source. I was moving through a tunnel now, but it wasn't a tunnel in the earthly sense. It was alive, breathing, made of memory and music and mercy. I heard songs, not sung with voices, but with light itself. Every note wrapped around me, healing what I didn't know was broken. There were no shadows, not here, only love, unfiltered, unconditional, undeniable. And the deeper I moved, the more I began to forget my pain, my fears, my name. But not my purpose, because even then, even in the drifting, I felt the vow pressing against my soul like fire behind glass. If you live, you must speak. And I wanted to ask, what must I say, to whom, and why me? But there was no need, because the answer was written into the breath I had just left behind. He called my name in the dark. And I followed, not with feet, not with thought, but with the deepest part of me, the part untouched by death, untouched by fear, the part that always knew him, even when I didn't. I moved toward the light, not with longing, but with recognition, like a child returning home after being lost for years. And I remembered, not facts, not events, but truth. I remembered the garden. I remembered the voice. I remembered the fast. The fast is the flame. I didn't understand it fully, not yet, but I felt its pull. I felt the sacred urgency in my spirit. This was not just a death, it was a return. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. And I kept rising, carried by light, surrounded by presence, ushered into the place where eternity unfolds like a scroll. And ahead, waiting in the radiance, was the one I didn't know I missed until I saw him. And everything was about to change. I crossed over. I do not know the exact moment it happened. Only that one breath faded and I was carried into something too holy for words. There was no door, no threshold, no thunder, no flash. Just transition, like slipping into a deeper current beneath the river of existence. A shift so gentle yet so absolute that nothing in me could deny it. I was not dreaming. I was not hallucinating. I was home. And what I saw, I cannot unsee. The atmosphere itself pulsed with glory. It wasn't air. It wasn't sky. It was presence, breathing, moving, alive. Light poured in from everywhere, but not the kind that casts shadows. This light knew no shadow. It illuminated from within, like truth made visible, like the soul of God stretched across infinity. I floated, if floating is even the right word, through layers of brilliance, gold that wasn't gold, blue that sang, green that pulsed like it had breath, every color alive, every particle worshiping, everything sacred, everything awake. Time did not exist here. Or if it did, it bowed to something greater. There was no urgency, no rush, just eternity uncoiling slowly, like the breath of God stretching across forever. And in that stillness, I felt it, love. Not the kind that whispers sweet things and walks away. Not the kind that depends on your worth or your beauty or your performance, but the kind of love that knows you to the marrow, that sees the worst, the deepest shame, and calls you precious. Still, always, now. That love swallowed me whole, and I did not resist, because I had finally come to the place where I was fully seen, fully known, and yet fully safe. And I wept, not with tears but with spirit, with a release that only heaven can command. He called my name in the dark, and now I stood in the light. I felt others around me, not in bodies, but in presence, souls, ancient, wise, kind. Some I recognized without ever having met them. There was no need for introduction. Recognition ran deeper than names. One soul brushed past mine, and suddenly I remembered a prayer I had whispered as a child, a forgotten cry under my breath during a thunderstorm. This soul had heard it, had held it, had brought it into the throne room. I was surrounded by witnesses, clouds of them, not watching to judge, but to celebrate. There were angelic beings, too. Light formed into sound, sound shaped into motion. They were not bound by form. They danced, they circled, they sang with wings that shimmered like silk in fire. Not one note clashed, not one movement jarred. It was worship. But not the worship I'd known on earth. This was worship without end, because it wasn't performed. It was being. The environment was worship. The hills, the air, the wind, the light. Everything glorified the Lamb. And even now, when I close my eyes, I hear it again. That great river of worship that flows like thunder and whisper all at once. Holy, holy, holy. And I remember what it felt like to join it, not from the lips, but from the soul. To become praise, to dissolve into adoration, to forget your pain because only His worth remains. He called my name in the dark, and the darkness fled. And in that place, in the still, roaring glory of the spirit realm, I remembered who I was. Not the girl in school, not the girl trying to fit in, not the girl hiding her hunger behind a smile. I was more, older than I knew, younger than time, written in the breath of God, marked before the foundations of the world. You were brought here to remember. And I did, not in thoughts, but in revelation, not in language, but in knowing, the fasting, the fire, the calling, the vow. It had all been written in heaven before my first heartbeat on earth, and I had forgotten. We all do. But there, in the radiance, it all returned. I was not just passing through heaven. I was being reawakened, refined, revealed, and every moment whispered to me, like a gentle tide brushing the soul, return to the fire, return to the fast, return to your first love, return. The worship deepened, the light grew stronger, and ahead, through the beauty and the song, a figure began to form. And I knew, without being told, I was about to meet the one who had always walked beside me, even when I never turned to look. He was waiting. Not with arms crossed, but arms open. And every step I took toward him was a step into myself, my real self. Not the broken, not the bound, but the burning one. Because once you stand in the presence of the one whose eyes are flames, you never go cold again. And I kept walking. Not because I was worthy, but because I was called. He called my name in the dark, and I answered. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. And then he appeared. I didn't see him with my eyes first. I felt him. The light began to shift, richer now, weightier, not brighter but deeper. It was like the air turned into worship itself, like love became form, like the breath of eternity drew close enough to touch. He didn't arrive in spectacle. There was no chariot, no thunder, no roaring wind, only stillness, so deep, so holy. It made every part of me fall silent. And then he stood before me. Jesus. Not the painting, not the stories I'd heard in children's church, not the softened figure on greeting cards or holiday posters. This was the living one, the fire-eyed shepherd, the lamb who still bore wounds, and the king who stood like glory, clothed in gentleness. He was not just light, he was truth. His presence disarmed every fear I didn't know I carried. My shame fell off of me like dust shaken from a robe. My doubts melted like frost in morning sun. There was no judgment in his gaze. None. Only fullness. Only the kind of love that searches every corner of your being and still remains. He knew me. Completely. He saw every memory, every lie I had believed, every silent ache. He saw the longing I never confessed and the weight I carried in silence. And still, he did not turn away. He stepped toward me, and the whole realm seemed to bow, not with movement, but with reverence. And in that nearness, he didn't speak with his mouth. He spoke with knowing. His words poured into my spirit like rivers into a dry valley. Every syllable was alive. Every word healed something I hadn't realized was broken. And he said to me, clearer than sound, "You were brought here to carry the flame." My spirit trembled, because even then, even surrounded by glory, I knew I wasn't worthy. I was young. I was ordinary. I had forgotten him so many times. And yet he stood before me not with accusation, but with commissioning. His eyes searched me, like they reached beyond flesh, beyond time, into the very code of my soul. And then he said it, the words that pierced me deeper than any sword. "Tell them about fasting. They have forgotten." He paused, and I felt the sorrow in him, not anger, not disappointment. Sorrow. Like a lover calling to a bride who had forgotten his voice. Like a father watching his children starve while the table remains full. Like a king offering his kingdom and finding the gates abandoned. "Tell them about fasting," he said again. "They have forgotten the fire, the power, the purpose. They hunger for miracles, but they will not empty themselves. They cry for me, but do not make room." I wept, not because of guilt, but because I understood. In that moment, he showed me, not with images, but with truth poured into my being. I saw generations numbed by indulgence. I saw prayers without weight, songs without surrender. I saw a church hungry for comfort, but allergic to consecration. I saw souls who loved the idea of Jesus, but not his presence, not his path, not his purity. And I saw the fire that used to fall when hearts were emptied, when flesh was denied, when secret fasting was laid like incense before the throne. That fire was rare now. "Tell them," he said. "Return to the fast, return to the fire." He placed no burden on my shoulders, no scroll, no weight, just a knowing, a sacred task sealed into the marrow of my spirit. "You were brought here to remember." And I did. I remembered the saints who fasted until heaven opened. I remembered Esther, Daniel, Anna, Jesus himself, 40 days in the wilderness, not to suffer but to prepare, to become a vessel emptied of all but God. Fasting was never punishment. It was permission, permission to burn, permission to see, permission to hear. Tell them. He said that fasting breaks the chains no hand can touch. And as he spoke, I saw chains break. Addictions, bitterness, fear, lust, generational curses, falling like old vines stripped from trees, and always the same rhythm underneath it all. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. His presence wrapped around me like robes of wind and light, and I felt so small, but never alone, never unseen. There was one final moment. He stepped closer, and though his face shone like the sun, I saw tears, not of weakness, but of love. He wept for those still asleep, for those who would hear this message and still turn away, for those who would scroll past, numb and full of everything but truth. And I made the vow, right there, in the light, in his presence. I vowed, if I live, I will speak. I will speak until the last light leaves my eyes. I will speak because he called my name in the dark, and I must answer. So now I carry the message, not for fame, not for applause, but because obedience is the only worship left when you've seen the face of Christ. He said, tell them about fasting. They have forgotten. So I am telling you now, return to the fast. Return to the fire. Return while there is still time. And then he opened my eyes, not the way you open your eyes to the morning light, but the way heaven opens the soul to what it was always meant to carry. He didn't take me by the hand. He didn't need to. He spoke into me, and I became what he spoke. And I saw, first, a great veil, thick and dark, draped over cities, over pulpits, over hearts, a suffocating veil, woven of comfort and indulgence and noise. Beneath it, I saw the church, not a building, but a people, dressed in white but stained with distraction, fed with excess but starving for glory, loud in worship but deaf in spirit. And the Lord said, they have forgotten the way. He showed me a table. It was full, overflowing with delicacies, plates stacked upon plates, spiritual buffet, but no fire, no sacrifice, no groaning of the soul, no desperation. And then the table vanished, and I saw another table, bare, empty, a single cup of water, a folded cloth, and kneeling before it, Esther, frail, trembling, radiant. I saw her tear her garments. I saw her cry out for her people. 3 days, no food, no water, not for attention but for deliverance. And I saw the heavens tremble. Then Moses, alone, his face buried in the mountain, 40 days without bread, his breath mingling with the breath of God, his skin cracked, his lips dry, but his soul burned with glory. And then I saw Jesus, in the wilderness, still, silent, 40 days, temptation gnashing at his heels. But he did not yield, because he was fed by something the world could not see. And the voice of the Lord filled the air. Fasting starves the flesh, so the spirit may rule. And I wept, because I had been taught about comfort, about blessings, about ease. But no one told me that the power flows from the place of denial, from the empty plate, from the groan of the surrendered soul. The fast is the flame. I saw the demons tremble when a child of God fasted in secret. I saw chains fall at the sound of an empty stomach offered in worship. I saw revival not born from stages, but from closets. Not from microphones, but from knees pressed into the earth in hunger. And then he showed me the war, not in the sky, but in the belly, in the mind, in the will. I saw believers, meant to be flames, walking around as flickers, because they fed their flesh and silenced their spirits. I saw spiritual slumber, the kind that looks like prosperity but smells like decay. The kind that sings worship with lips but curses sacrifice with comfort. And he said, they have traded their fire for fullness. They feast, but they are blind. They entertain demons while starving their destinies. And the revelation broke me, because I had done it too. I had filled the void with noise. I had numbed the hunger with distraction. I had silenced the voice of calling by feeding the craving of flesh. But in the fire of fasting, I saw what was lost, and I saw what could be recovered. The fast is the flame. Then he showed me what's coming, a generation that will not be known by their talent, but by their tears, by their empty bowls, by their blistered knees. They will not seek platforms, but portals. They will fast, not for favor, but to be refined. And through their hunger, the heavens will open again. I saw children fasting and prophesying. I saw mothers fasting for their households and demonic altars shattering in silence. I saw youth who chose hunger over entertainment, and demons screamed as cities shook. I saw a revival not of noise, but of consecration. A holy wildfire sparked not by the crowd, but by the crucified will. The fast is the flame. And then I saw the truth, hidden for so long, suppressed, buried beneath doctrines of comfort and diluted gospels, not because it was weak, but because it was dangerous. The enemy fears a fasting church, because a fasting church is a seeing church, a hearing church, a burning church. And then the vision shifted again. It was no longer the past he was showing me, no longer the saints of old, no longer the forgotten flames. It was the future. It was what's coming, what is already beginning to rise in the hidden corners of the earth, like a whisper turning into a storm. He opened my spirit to behold it, not with eyes of flesh, but with eyes that had seen eternity. And I saw them, a generation, barefoot, nameless, unseen, not dressed in robes or suits, but in ashes and oil, not seeking pulpits or applause, but seeking the face. Teenagers shutting their doors, turning off their phones, pushing away their plates, not out of legalism, but out of love. I saw little rooms lit only by candles, young girls with their Bibles open, trembling with hunger, young boys crying on the floor with fists clenched, wrestling their flesh into silence, not because someone told them to, but because heaven called them to. He called their names in the dark, and they answered. I saw mothers fasting for prodigals, fathers breaking in repentance, calling their families back to the altar. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was real. Secret fasts, unseen sacrifices, prayers whispered at 3 a.m. when the world lay sleeping, and the earth, the very fabric of the world, began to shake. I saw governments trembling. I saw demonic thrones cracking. I saw principalities being dethroned by the prayers of teenagers whose names no one knew. The fast is the flame. I saw pastors fall to their knees, not from burnout, but from brokenness, from returning. I saw churches empty of spectators and full of soldiers, not fighting with fists, but with fasts, with consecration, with discipline sharpened by love. Jesus showed me a great map, a map of the world, and small dots of fire began to glow, at first scattered, hidden, barely visible, but then they grew. Each fast lit another. Each secret hunger drew heaven closer. Each refusal of the flesh became an open door for glory, and the dots became rivers. The rivers became flames, until the earth pulsed with revival, but not the revival we expected. Not stages, not crowds, but surrender, sacrifice, stillness. Return to the fast. Return to the flame. Return while there is still time. And then I heard his voice again, more thunderous than before, but still somehow tender. They will awaken. They were chosen. He spoke it like a decree, not a wish, a certainty. And I knew it deep in my bones. This generation is marked, not for comfort, not for entertainment, but for awakening. They are being called in the night, through dreams, through groanings, through holy discontent, and they are responding. I saw school gymnasiums turned into sanctuaries. I saw college dorms filled with incense prayers. I saw social media silenced so that the secret place could speak. I saw a new earth, not one built by politics or policies, but by the quiet laying down of lives. An earth where light ruled again, where the spirit hovered like in the beginning, because it found people who made room. Room through fasting, room through fire, room through yielding. I saw nations whose names were never on the news become epicenters of revival. I saw children in huts casting out demons, women in underground churches healing the sick, elderly men in villages praying for 10 hours a day and shaking heaven with every breath. And it all began with the fast, with people saying, "I will not eat until he comes. I will not feed my flesh while my spirit sleeps. I will burn until I see him again." The fast is the flame. The fast is the flame. The fast is the flame. And as I watched this rising remnant, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. They weren't waiting for revival. They were the revival. Not because they shouted louder, not because they posted more, but because they died to self in the secret place until only Jesus remained. They became altars, and on every altar, he answered with fire. Return to the fast, return to the flame. He called your name in the dark. Will you answer? He showed me this so I would never forget. And now I show it to you, so you will remember. They will awaken. They were chosen. So now I ask you, not as a preacher, not as a prophet, but as a soul who saw the end of all things and was sent back with a single burden. Will you burn? Will you empty yourself? Will you fast until the heavens break open over your house? This is not about works. This is not about punishment. This is about returning. Because the gates are still open, the oil is still flowing, the bridegroom is still calling, but the hour is late. Return to the fast. Return to the flame. Return while there is still time. I came back gasping, like surfacing from depths too holy for lungs to remember. Cold sheets, bleached light, machines clicking in rhythm with borrowed breath, and voices, human voices now, buzzing somewhere outside the veil I had just passed through. But none of it felt real. Not the beeping monitors. Not the IV in my arm. Not the confused eyes of the nurses who hovered like ghosts. Because something inside me had changed. No, more than changed. Something inside me had died, and something eternal had taken its place. I didn't just return. I returned with fire in my bones. But the world had not waited. The world had not changed. Only I had. And so, I spoke. The moment I could form words through cracked lips and parched throat, I told them. My parents. The nurse with kind eyes. The chaplain who sat stiffly in his collar. I told them everything. The light. The voice. The fasting. The flame. The king who called my name in the dark and showed me what is coming. And their eyes shifted. First concern, then confusion, then quiet dismissal. As if I had been hallucinating. As if I were still 12, still dreaming in Sunday school metaphors. They told me I'd suffered cardiac arrest, a seizure, a lack of oxygen. They called it a near-death experience. They said I was lucky. They said I should rest. But how could I rest when the weight of heaven's grief still pressed into my chest like an unfinished sentence? I told them about the fast. I told them how the church was asleep, how Jesus is calling us back to hunger, back to fire, back to him. And they smiled politely, as though indulging the trauma of a child who read too many Bible stories. And the moment they walked away, I wept. Not because they didn't believe me, but because I knew this was the beginning of the silence I would walk through. I had touched the eternal, but I had to speak it into a world that no longer listens. That night, when the hospital grew still and even the hallway lights dimmed, I closed my eyes to rest, but the veil had thinned, too thin now, and the war began. In the dark hours, I saw them, shadows that crept along the hospital walls. Not imagined, felt. Mocking spirits, watching, whispering, retreating when I prayed, but circling again when I grew weary. Dreams that felt like drowning, nightmares soaked in sulfur, hands reaching for me with no faces attached. I tried to record what I saw. I tried to type it, to write it, to share it. But my phone glitched. My screen froze. Text disappeared. Files corrupted. Every time I tried to speak it, something tried to silence me. The more I pressed in, the heavier the resistance became. My heart would race without cause. I'd hear static when I played worship music. Once, my Bible app deleted itself while I was reading the book of Joel. They will awaken. They were chosen. I clung to those words like a lifeline in the storm. And when I felt the shadows tightening their grip, I went back to the only thing I knew would burn them back. I fasted. Still weak. Still healing. Still 15 and fragile. I fasted. And the moment I did, the fog lifted. Not all at once, but enough for clarity to pierce through, enough to remember the vow, enough to whisper into the night. I will speak. I will not be silent. They can mock me. They can call it a dream. They can say it was a child's delusion, a side effect of death. But I died. And I saw. And I was sent back with a message that cannot remain buried. I speak because I must. Because there are others like me. Others who are being called. Others who have felt the stirring but didn't have language for it. Others who've been marked but are afraid to burn, and if I say nothing, the fire will devour me from within. So I speak. Return to the fast. Return to the flame. He called your name in the dark. Will you answer? Even now, I know the resistance hasn't ended. Every time I open my mouth, something unseen rises against it. But something greater rises within me. Because I carry more than memory. I carry commission. And though I walk in a world that forgets, I remember. I remember the weight of his eyes, the tremble in his voice, the tears. He wept for a people who will not fast. I remember the flame, and I will not let it die. The fast is the flame is the call, and I have answered. And now, I must tell you what he told me to say, not just for memory's sake, not for story, but for war. Because we are in it now, even if you do not see it, even if the world pretends it is still at peace, there is a war underway. Not of guns and blood, but of spirits and souls. It is quiet in its approach, subtle in its seduction, but deadly because it does not steal your breath. It steals your hunger. It numbs your ache for God until you forget you were ever born to burn. And that is why I was sent back. Not because I was special, not because I was strong, but because I had seen the flame, and he knew I would not be silent. There is a shaking coming, a trembling that will split kingdoms, undo the proud, and sift even the church. And only those who are rooted, those who are emptied of the world and filled with his spirit, only they will stand. Fasting is not for the elite. It is not for the extreme. It is for survival. It is the armor you will not see, but the only one that will hold when your strength fails and the earth groans beneath judgment. The fast is the flame. The flame is your weapon. The weapon is your worship. And you, yes, you were chosen to hear this. Not because you scrolled at the right time, not because of accident or algorithm, because heaven has summoned you. I feel it even now as I speak. Someone watching, heart racing, soul stirred. You've known for months, maybe years, that something isn't right, that you were made for something deeper, that the noise has grown too loud and your spirit too quiet. This is not coincidence. This is your summons. You are being called out of comfort, out of crowds, out of compromise. You are being invited into the wilderness, where the word becomes your bread and the fast becomes your fire. He is calling you to remember, to return to the ancient paths, to the sacred silence of sacrifice, to the place where flesh dies and truth begins to rise. Do not wait for a platform. Do not wait for a pulpit. Do not wait for your pastor or your peers. Begin now. Shut the door. Turn the plate. Open the word. Tear your heart, not your garments. Cry out to the Lord while he may still be found, because the days ahead, they are darker than you know, and only the disciplined, the consecrated, the burning ones will shine like stars in the midnight hour. Return to the fast, return to the flame. He called your name in the dark. Will you answer? He told me this before I left that place of light. Tell them before it's too late. And I feel the ache in his voice like a thunder wrapped in tears. Tell them. Not to impress, not to terrify, but to prepare. Because love warns. And this is his warning. There is a famine coming, but not of bread, not of water, a famine of truth, a famine of presence, a famine of fire. And the only ones who will survive are those who have fed their spirit now, those who fast while others feast, those who kneel while others mock, those who watch while others sleep. You were chosen to hear this. You were not left behind. You were marked for such a time as this. So rise, fast, pray, weep between the porch and the altar, clean your hands, consecrate your time, purge your lips with the coal of repentance, and do it now, before the shaking breaks you. He called my name in the dark, and now I call yours. Return, before it's too late. Return. While grace still lingers like dew on the fields, return, before the night swallows the unprepared. This is the hour, not next week, not when you're ready. Now. Return to the fast, return to the flame. He called your name in the dark. Will you answer? The air feels thinner now, as if even time itself is kneeling, because what I've spoken, what I've remembered, what I've carried, was never just a message. It was a mandate. A sacred trust handed to a soul who was supposed to die, but didn't. Who should have stayed on the other side of the veil, but instead was sent back burning. Not because I was brave, not because I was worthy, but because I said yes. Because when he looked into me, when he searched every shadow and every secret and still called me his, I knew that silence was no longer an option, and I've paid for that. Yes, not in blood, but in loneliness. In the weight of being misunderstood, in the cold echo of telling the truth when no one wants to hear it. Obedience will cost you, but silence will cost them. And so, I keep speaking, even when my voice shakes, even when the darkness laughs, even when the fire consumes more of me than I ever thought I could survive. I keep speaking because someone must. Someone must say the thing that others have buried beneath comfort. Someone must remember what the church has forgotten. The fast is the flame. The fast is the flame. The fast is the flame. It purifies. It awakens. It prepares the soul for the weight of his glory. But fasting is not trendy. It's not marketable. It won't fill pews. It empties them and fills altars instead. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the revival we're waiting for won't come with confetti and crowds. Maybe it begins in the silence of a teenager's bedroom, with an untouched plate and a broken heart. Maybe it starts with you. Yes, you. This isn't just my story. It's yours. You've felt it. The tug, the ache, the holy discontent that won't let you settle. You've heard him in the quiet places, calling your name like he called mine. He called my name in the dark. And now he calls yours. The veil is lifting. The time is short. The harvest is vast, but the workers, so few. So what will you do? Will you go back to scrolling, to comfort, to safety? Or will you rise? Will you kneel? Will you fast? Because the kingdom is not built by those who watch, but by those who weep. Not by those who feast, but by those who burn. You have been chosen to hear this, chosen to remember, chosen to carry the flame, so carry it. even when it scorches, even when it isolates, even when the world tells you you're too intense, too sensitive, too strange. Keep speaking, keep burning, keep fasting. Because one day, one trembling day, the skies will split, the trumpet will sound, and the bridegroom will come for a people who have made themselves ready. And readiness looks like fire. So now I ask you, as one who has seen the end, as one who returned only to speak, will you fast? Will you weep? Will you live like eternity is real? Will you answer the call? Return to the fast, return to the flame, return to Christ, return while there is still time. This is not religion, this is rescue, this is not tradition, this is truth. And the gospel, the raw, unfiltered gospel, is still enough. Return to the gospels, open them again, let them wreck you, let them refine you. Because in the words of Jesus, there is still life, there is still power, there is still fire. Let the word undo you, let it strip you clean, let it remake you. And when it does, when your knees find the floor and your heart finds its hunger again, don't keep it to yourself, speak it, live it, burn with it. This is the Serene Bible. If this moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, fast, pray, awake. The time is now, the time is now, the time is now. The veil is lifting. Will you answer the call? Whisper fades into silence. Return to the fast, return to the flame, return to Him.